All right. Welcome to the Dpdk Summit North America. I'm Arpit, Joshipura. I head up open source networking, edge, and IoT at the Linux Foundation. And on behalf of the governing board, Jim St. Ledger, who is on a sabbatical, I'm excited to welcome you to this summit. I have been told that there are several housekeeping rules here, starting with a code of conduct. Obviously, you all are, but just wanted to remind you, be respectful, recognize every person. This is a professional setting. Ideas are always welcome. Yeah, we just have to be nice to each other. And it is live, and it is live from a presentation perspective. So I'm assuming, there will be glitches is required. And for example, I want to just make sure that I am heard. So can we make sure I get a +1 on everything? I'm okay. Folks can hear me. All right, very good. Okay, back to live. All right. Okay, so things about this platform. The good news is you are in already, so you kind of know how to get in. But the 4 buttons that I want to make sure everybody knows: on the left, there is what's happening now in the schedule. There's the sessions. There is obviously one-on-one networking, which is a key part, and a help desk. Chat, you're chatting, so that's where you do it. And then, of course, if you need any direct messages. And this is important. There are session rooms, but given this is kind of a single-track conference or a summit, each talk has an individual session ID and a session room. So you can't just stay on this and expect that keynotes and talks will continue going on. You will have to move to the next session by clicking on the session tab. I had that happen to me once, and I realized it the hard way that the other session had already started. So they just start. The session room actually starts 5 minutes before their scheduled time. So please, as soon as I'm done, go to the next one and click on that side. There's chats. There's Q&A, and I would like all of you to be ready with questions that I can answer. And of course, there is networking, which is a major part of this virtual event. This works best in Chrome. Disconnect from VPN if you can't see live session. Refresh your browsers. Just the usual technical stuff that all you techies are quite familiar with. Okay. So with that said, I was requested to give a state of open source networking and edge, and clearly it's really focused on what's the big picture view that is enabled by Dpdk, right? I'm not going to talk about what Dpdk is. You are all the experts, but you can see the impact Dpdk is having on the global community, global projects, global ecosystem. And sometimes when we are in the bits and bytes, we don't realize this. But in the last 11 years, right, this whole ecosystem has matured significantly, from distributions to hardware and drivers, right, that are, pretty much all of them, to other open source projects that consume Dpdk. And this is very important because each open source vertical has a pull from a market or from a technology area and things like that. And I'll talk about one of those today that LF Networking is pulling in, called Blueprints, Super Blueprints. It's got services, training, members, right? So again, very healthy and very robust ecosystem. Thank you all for being part of this. You're part of these organizations that are using these projects to consume Dpdk, right, downstream. That could be anything from FIDO to Tungsten Fabric, or it could be in the distros, or it could be part of storage projects, or testing and packet or TCP/IP. I mean, we're at a point now where the use cases are very broad, right? From load balancing, routing, switching, security, even VNFs and CNFs on the telecom stack, and in general. There are a lot of downstream consumers. So thank you very much for being that sort of lowest layer of the stack, where you don't get to see what's happening downstream or up the stack. But clearly, I can tell you there's a lot going on. So I want to show you that from an outside top-down perspective, and some of the initiatives that Linux Foundation is doing to enable projects like Dpdk and others. So on the bottom, you see these projects, right? And these are just some simple projects, right? Everything from RAN to automation on ONAP to Edge to Kubernetes. And these projects really represent the entire life cycle of a developer, right? So LF hosts the projects, there's a community, there's releases, these projects come together into an open interop, and then enterprise networking, service provider networkings, and there could be any end users, governments, and then all of these verticals, right? Industrial, energy, commerce, retail, home, automotive, etc. They all utilize the set of projects below, right? And historically, they have been integrated quite well by our community and by our members and system integrators and things like that. There's one thing that we are doing, which is kind of the 5G blueprints, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, that will pull a set of use cases that are important to this community. And this is how I would probably show it. So from the left to right, you have mobile access and projects like ORAN Alliance and Linux Foundation, and we host what is called ORAN Software Community. That's where it's on the 4th release. That's where the Open RAN 5G access software kind of disaggregates and opens up. Then there's projects like HomeEdge, Fledge, Eve, EdgeX, Crano. They're all part of what is called User Edge and Service Provider Edge that come in and take advantage of IoT, Cloud Edge, telecom, all these markets that are both at the IoT and the on-prem level, but also at the edge compute level in a smart data center or below the base stations, right? So there's projects like that. Then there's some version of a cloud, public, hybrid, carrier, core, doesn't matter. And it's cloud from not just the public players, but also, globally there are lots of public clouds. And then there's the core stack, which has kind of the infrastructure layer where, you see Dpdk and FDIO, and then Kubernetes and OpenStack, OpenDaylight, Tungsten Fabric, and then, automation projects like ONAP and most recently, an open mobile packet core called Magma, which was a Facebook donation to the Linux Foundation. It's part of the LF portfolio. And then projects like Anuket that brings end-to-end solutions and use cases and blueprints together. So you can see that there's a set of projects, and these are sample only, there's a lot more, that make up solutions, and they make up use cases, and then they make up blueprints. And all three are kind of very specific words that are used in the community. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to explain one such initiative called 5G Blueprint. And you can see why this is important and why Dpdk and the community plays a big role. The good news is, we may not have any upstream requirements into Dpdk yet, but that could change. So once this community participates in the blueprint effort. So think of the blueprints, the Super 5G blueprint, as the start of what is called global open source collaboration, right? So it's an initiative, it's not a project, and it basically brings in through a community process multiple of these umbrellas like LF networking, LF Edge, Magma, CNCF, ORAN, and then the associated upstream projects like Dpdk, etc., together to solve, cloud native 5G or private lines or private networks or things like that. And this is a vehicle for communities to collaborate, right? One of the toughest problems that we have is if Dpdk wants to communicate with a project, normally the TSCs talk, and then, what's the forum, what's the platform for pulling it into a solution or a use case. So this is what's happening is there's a set of projects that the initial end users like US government, DARPA, DOD, governments from Africa, tier 2 carriers, a lot of the large service providers in the telecom space, and some of the enterprise players As 5G private line comes in, they want and expect the community to integrate or pre-integrate as many open source projects as possible so that they can get an end-to-end view of the ecosystem. So if you take user edge, everything from and these projects may not be necessarily Linux Foundation, or they could be outside, but the thing that the community wants to do, and LF networking is just simply hosting this initiative. It doesn't have to be LFN projects only, but that's where you can see that we are pulling in several of these projects into an end-to-end blueprint. Now, I'm going to go very quick on how these blueprints come into place, but there's a roadmap like any other project on how things are getting built. And I'm going to visually show you this roadmap every quarter on how these projects come together, what value it provides, and what use cases they're focusing on, right? So things like fixed wireless access, private 5G for enterprise, multi-access edge, IoT, right? Voice, et cetera, et cetera. They are all very important from a use case perspective. So think of it this way. There's the market and the user, right? They could be the verticals I talked about. They could be governments. They could be service providers, et cetera. Then there is the use case. Hey, I need voice services. I need fixed wireless access. I need private 5G. Then there is the blueprint. And a blueprint itself is of declarative configuration. It has CI/CD. It's open interop, open testing. It's repeatable, and things like that. And that's what the community focuses on. So let's take an example. Phase 1 of this blueprint integrates the NFVI stack with Dpdk, obviously, Kubernetes, into Magma and ONAP, as well as Anuket Kubernetes and Akraino, right? So it's basically the core stack coming together with the edge stack, including infrastructure, using just emulators on the access side. Then commercial Gnode Bs are added, which is the RAN gear, and a slice is introduced through the end-to-end network. And then we have the final phase where ORAN SC comes in and has a full end-to-end network slice. And now this is where multiple use cases for enterprise, for carriers, for service providers, for governments globally, they can utilize an automated all end-to-end open source stack to take advantage of this. Now, keep in mind, this is not a distro. This is not a product. This is just an initiative to pre-integrate based on use cases. There's still a need for system integrators and vendors and operators to step in and kind of support it, productize it. There's lots of money to be made in this ecosystem. But I just want to highlight, this is a very important initiative. And you can see now that, we're talking 10,000-foot view in terms of a pull of projects like Dpdk and others. Okay, so from a networking and a priority perspective, the community is focused extremely on integrating these stacks, spending a lot on the backend and interop open deployment process, as well as integrating into the vertical markets. And as part of that, if there is code that needs to be changed upstream into a FIDO or a Dpdk or any of the VPP things, that's what the community knows how to do, but we have a platform and a forum to do that. All of this, by the way, will be shown in a huge setup under the Open Networking and Edge Summit, which is a hybrid conference. It used to be ONS, now it's one summit. It's in the fall here in LA on October 11th and 12th. And I think you may have submitted CFPs, but if not, please register and get that going. So that's the big picture view. Let me wrap up with a few Dpdk highlights before we get into the specific talks. We had a Dpdk summit in China, and Jim's saying hi from his sabbatical, obviously, but very active, lots of registration, and this was attended not just from China, but China, India, US, right? So good summit there. We also had diversity and inclusion badging. So as you know, we have projects in Linux Foundation that kind of foster the diversity and inclusion practices, and you get badges for that. So congratulations to Dpdk. We have a gold badge, also another gold badge for the North America event. So thank you very much for being so proactive on this topic. Another update is the community lab that we have, which is, again, for those of you who are already participating, this is a neutral testing and benchmarking platform for the developer community. It can be used by the members, the maintainers, the testers, etc. And obviously, you can submit hardware test applications to be run on a priority basis. So again, operational. Thank you for making this happen, and thank you for supporting these labs, right? That's how projects go. Again, it's been going on for quite some time. Now, this is where I do not want to go into details here, but clearly the releases that are coming out are top-notch, super, continuously expanding drivers and enriching features with every release. This has been going on for quite some time. The most recent one obviously had the Windows support, and I think there are a few talks that will cover that. There's lots of good security enhancements going on. The breadth of network drivers, the breadth of silicon support, you have to do it. It's kind of a horizontal layer on the stack, and I think the team's working fantastic. The thing I want to talk about or point your attention to is the pie charts on the right. And it might not be very clear, but you can go to LFX Insights. Dpdk is already covered by this. But if you look at 5 years ago, there was a heavy concentration by a couple of members, 3 members, on the commits. And now if you look at just the last 90 days, you can see that the diversity of contribution has significantly increased. The pies are kind of much more even. Doesn't mean that a particular member or set of members have reduced their contribution. It means others have increased. So this is what we would like to see in a healthy open source project. And I can proudly say that Dpdk is quite healthy there in terms of community diversity as well as successful projects. So keep going, keep contributing. And obviously, once we do that, the market reacts well. We don't have all the coverage here, but you can see some of the headlines that were picked up by our members, pushed by announcements by Dpdk, as well as our members and downstream users. And these headlines basically allow the momentum to pretty much go up and continue from our perspective. So with that said, today's agenda is on the events page. I think you will hear on RISC-V, you'll hear things on Windows, OpenShift, as well as cloud networking, and then tomorrow, there's a lot more topics. I will come back tomorrow and kind of wrap this up. But with that said, I would like to thank this community, enjoy the summit, and I am going to go back to the chat and see if there's any. Again, for questions, you can just throw the question into the chat. One good to see if you are paying attention or if I can answer the question, assuming everybody's live and joining. So any questions? If not, we will wrap this session up. I'd like to keep you all on time. And as I reminded everybody, please, go to the sessions on the left and go to the next. You will have to do this for every session because each of them have a separate protected area to work from. And thank you very much. Bye.